Hello friends, today your friend Juggler is going to telling you about, what if Naruto was died and the darkness reborn, part 3. Check the creator from link given in the description, and if you enjoy this video then please like, share and subscribe my channel. Let's start the story. When heaven imploded upon itself from the destruction of the heavenly forge itself, the impact was felt by all the humans who dwelled in the mortal realm. Only humans were affected by this, though, since their very souls were connected to the realms of heaven and hell, with their actions enlightening or corrupting the connection so as to place their soul in the right location. Other species had souls as well, but the false gods never linked theirs to the realms, since they thought of them as inferior races and wanted them dead, since they would not fall in line and worship them like the simple-minded humans had for almost all of time itself. The people of world all fell to their knees when the heavens were destroyed, since they felt the impact in their very souls, and it caused them all to feel so very weak because of it. The feeling passed quickly, and while many wondered what in the world had caused them to feel like that, there was nothing to go on, since when people tried to find out what had happened there was nothing physically wrong with them. No one had a clue as to the fact that the connection to the afterlife had been severed, and that was what had caused them such a weakening experience. Minato had ordered more research into the unusual phenomenon, but while they did that he gathered the group of people that would come with him to the Dark Empire of the West. He brought along Danzo, of course, since the main plan was to use the Sharingan implanted in his eye to manipulate the leader of the empire to give up his throne without a fight, so that their empire could expand without a fight. He also brought along Tsum and her two children Kiba and Hana, as well as Hayashi, since he had the best diplomatic skills in the village. Hayashi agreed to go, but he brought Niji along, since while away from home he needed a servant to order around, as was his right as a main branch family member. He included Kurane as well, since she could use her beauty to make the emperor drop his guard just long enough to do what needed to be done. Asuma had died in the siege of Suna when Gaara killed him, but it was all the distraction Konoha needed to have him restrained by Kushina's chains. And with that their group was complete, and they made their way towards the Dark Empire. Minato made sure to kiss his wife goodbye and left her in charge of the village's security, while the councils took care of all the boring paperwork while he was gone. The trip would take 2 weeks at least, since the Dark Empire capital was so far away from theirs, and yet in their minds the trip would be worth it in the end. The arrogant party were so caught up in thinking that they had already won in this little event that not a single one of them noticed the small pack of jet black wolves that continued to follow them from a distance as per the orders of their master. Namikaze Castle. Kushina had just gotten out of the shower, since she had done some gardening work in her spare time. Sure, she was in charge of security in the capital, but since most if not all forms of resistance had been utterly crushed in the past 10 years, there was not much to do nowadays. So she took it upon herself to regrow the gardens of the castle they now lived in, since what had been there was destroyed and trampled upon in the siege that Minato led against the fire daimyo. The fool had thought himself safe from such a thing, but was taught a valuable lesson when 2/3 of his own samurai had turned on him and dragged him outside to be executed for being an ineffective leader. The fight had been quick, but there had still been damage done to the area that had to be fixed, with the garden falling upon her by choice. As she got out of the shower, she stood in front of the mirror in her room and took off her towel to check out her body. For a woman in her early 40s, she still had a body that many women would die for, since her tits were still quite perky with no sign of sagging, and she had an ass that made many a man turn their heads to do a double take to get another look at it. But even with the sexy body of a MILF, she was still so sad. You see, she had not had any form of sex with her husband for the past several years, and not for the lack of trying, since she had tried many times to initiate it in various ways, from subtle hints to full-on sexy lingerie, and even going so far as to flash him glimpses of her pussy to try to increase his lust to the point that he would just fuck her already. But he always had an excuse as to why he didn't want to, and at first she had been suspicious that he had been cheating on her. But when she spied on him, he was truly doing paperwork, and if not that, he was helping plan out new things to advance their empire with his architects. All in all, it was starting to drive her to the brink of insanity since she had so much pent-up sexual frustration and her husband was not fulfilling them. It was times like this that she cursed herself for being an Uzumaki since they had honor and kept their vows until their dying day, or at least until they were divorced. If she was not of that clan she would have had so many affairs by now since there were plenty of men in the city who would have liked to take her to bed and screw her brains out, but alas she was unable to. So it seemed like tonight would be another night of masturbation with various toys to lessen the frustration just a smidge, but even though she did that it never fully satisfied her in the end. So she put on her bathrobe and was about to go into the walk-in closet to get her box of toys. But out of nowhere a hand covered her mouth with a rag that the fumes caused her to fall asleep. Dungeon, Kusina awoke with a start and the first thing she noticed was the fact that she was no longer in her own home. She was hanging in midair with her legs not even touching the ground. She saw that she was in her bathrobe still, so that at least was good sign, if only a slight one at that. When she tried to move, she noticed she was unable to budge even an inch since she was covered in multiple threads that appeared to be strings of some sort, yet somehow were stronger than most shackles that littered dungeons the world over. Kusina kept her cool and called upon her bloodline to summon up a chakra chain with a sharp tip to cut the stings that bound her, but it did no good since the strings seemed to repel the chain when she tried to cut it, and no matter how hard she tried it would not cut in the slightest. "Are the accommodations to your liking?" said a voice in the corner of the room that was shrouded in darkness. Kusina looked at the corner and saw nothing there, but when she looked for a brief second longer she saw a pair of golden-colored eyes that shone with power. "Who are you?" shouted Kusina as she summoned up even more chains in a threatening manner, "and how dare you kidnap me from my home? I demand that you let me go this instant." "Demand," said the figure with a raised eyebrow, not that she could see it, and in such a situation such as this, how do you see yourself in any form of position as to demand anything from me? "Do it or I will skewer your body with my chains and rip your body apart," shouted Kusina in rage, but was surprised to see the figure was not intimidated in the slightest by her threat. "Is that supposed to frighten me in some way?" said the figure as it stood up and walked out of the shadows so that she could see him, and she had to admit that the man who stood before her was quite a looker, cause to perfectly honest, it doesn't. Not in the slightest. "I warned you," said Kusina as she launched her chains at the man, and saw them pierce his chest. But once they pierced him, she could no longer move them, or even recall them for that matter. "What is happening here? Why won't my chains retract?" "Because I simply won't let them," said the man as he watched with a smirk on his face as the darkness began to absorb the chains into himself. Kusina screamed in pain as she felt her bloodline being pushed to the very limit and beyond what she was ever capable of, as it was all absorbed into the strange man, and just like with a roll of string, there was an end to it. Once it got to the point it felt like someone had torn a huge chunk out of her back as the last of her bloodline was absorbed into the shadowy man. And even though there had been enormous amounts of pain, there was no physical damage to her body of any sort. "What did you just do to me?" asked Kusina weakly, since what had just happened had taken quite a bit out of her. "I took your bloodline from you," said the man as he tested his newly acquired power out and formed a chain that wrapped around his arm, "while I am able to create such chains. With my powers as they were before I absorbed yours, I was sadly unable to extract energy with them like yours can. So I thank you for adding to my already impressive arsenal of murder and mayhem." "If that is the case you should let me go," said Kusina, "since you are so grateful for the stolen gift." "It brings joy to my heart to deny you that option," chuckled Naruto, since he found it funny that she would suggest such a thing in the first place, but nice try there. "Who the hell are you?" growled Kusina, since she was now powerless to attack this asshole that was just standing there and taunting her like this. "You see," said the figure as he wagged his finger, "I could tell you who I am, but I would rather see how long it takes for you to remember me instead." "Remember you? I have never seen you before in my life. Why am I not surprised?" sighed the figure, since it's not so shocking to hear that you don't remember me at all. We did only meet twice in my entire life. Once when I was younger and the second time was years later. Ringing any bells here? No, said Kushina as she thought hard on the identity of the man in front of her but came up short on names. Well, I will keep giving you small bits of information until you recognize me, since I can't wait to see the look on your face when you realize just who I am and fully understand how badly you and your family fucked up with their actions against me. What does my family have to do with this? We never did anything to you. Wrong, shouted the figure as he slapped her hard across the face as he shouted the word, your family took everything from me. Who are you? Said Kushina painfully since she was still utterly clueless and the identity of the man before her. Still don't recognize me, said the man as he composed himself. Fine then. I will tell you a little bit at a time to the point that you remember me. You only met me twice in your entire life. Kushina remained silent. I was hated by all those who knew of me. And yet no one aided me in the daily struggle of survival. Still she said nothing. I was once part of that pathetic village known as Konoha. Kushina looked up at the man as he said that last one, the clouds in her mind starting to clear up a bit as he said this. Her mind was starting to put the pieces together. My death was the rallying cry that led to Konoha becoming the Fire Empire after all. Those who I considered friends were killed for voicing their hatred towards you and your pathetic husband. It was that last hint that her mind finally pieced everything together for her, and her eyes opened wide in shock as the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Naruto. In the living flesh, chuckled Naruto as he saw the look of shock on her face from seeing the boy she saw die first. And somehow still alive. Now you remember. How are you still alive? We killed you. Yes, I know all about that, mother, since I was there, growled Naruto as he remembered that day with crystal clarity. I even had the best seat in the place for the execution as the one being unjustly killed. Your death was justified since in the end the Kyuubi was killed and the threat of it returning was forever gone. While it is true that Kyuubi died when I did, with our very souls merging together, said Naruto as a tendril arose behind her with a sharp needle in it with the intention to inject the knowledge of his life so far into her head. But in his place came me, and let me tell you that I am a million times worse than that demon ever was on his worst day. Naruto then penetrated deep into her head. He injected what he wanted her to know. Once the process was done, she looked at him with unspeakable horror in her eyes. You monster, said Kushina, how could you do those things to children? It was quite easy and so very enjoyable, my dear. So what do you want with me? I think you know exactly what I want from you, said Naruto as he ripped her bathrobe off her body, showing him her naked body, which he had to admit was actually pretty sexy for a woman who had given birth to 3 kids. You sick fuck, shouted Kushina in disgust, you would rape your own flesh and blood, mother. I would, said Naruto simply as he pinched her nipples and tugged them hard to get her juices flowing, but instead I want you to beg me to rape you senseless. It will be more fun that way. I will do no such thing, shouted Kushina, but was unable to say anything else since from behind her a person reached around and started to fondle her tits. And what shocked her even more was that said person had a third arm reach downwards and begin to finger her pussy, causing her to moan out loud since it had been so long since she had been touched. As she did, Fu grabbed her head with a fourth arm and turned it sideways so that she could kiss Kushina deep with tongue, and as she did this she spat out a few clumps of tiny eggs that were packed full of powerful aphrodisiacs that send even the most strong-willed of women into a lustful frenzy to the point that they beg for the first cock they see. What did you do to me? Moaned out Kushina as her body began to spasm from an intense orgasm which was the side effect from the drug she consumed. I had my sister inject you with a concentrated amount of a powerful aphrodisiac. It will slowly drive you mad since it makes even the slightest movement cause you to orgasm. And to prove the point home, Naruto stepped forward to flick one of her nipples, and as he did she came from that action alone. Why would you do this to me? I am your mother. You screwed me out of my life, so in return I'm going to screw your life. Both metaphorically as well as literally, said Naruto as he beckoned for Fu to come out from behind Kushina. She did as he beckoned for her to do, and as she did, Kushina saw that she had multiple arms that she retracted back into her body as she stood in front of her. She then ejected 2 needles from her ring fingers and stabbed her in the nipples and used them to inject chemicals into her breasts. Once she pumped enough, she retracted them from them and watches as Kushina's breast began to leak breast milk. Fu then reached behind her back and pulled out 2 ping-pong-sized eggs that cracked open and 2 beetle-like bugs jumped out and latched onto her squirting breasts. They began to suck the milk, and as they did they wiggled in place as they did. Kushina began to moan as she orgasmed continuously from the bug's movement. So enjoy yourself for the time being, said Naruto as he pointed downwards towards her pussy, to which Fu understood exactly what he meant. She used another needle to inject her in the clit. This one stopped her from orgasming but made the feeling turn into a painful knot in her stomach that would drive her mind crazy since it will try to come yet won't be able to and drive her hormones insane. Because now you get to suffer for a few days until I wish to come back here and rape you senseless. Let's see just how long it takes you to lose your mind and beg me for the sexual release that your body will desperately crave. We have 2 weeks until your husband arrives, and trust me when I say that you will be broken by the time he gets here. You ungrateful child! Shouted Kushina in pain at the feeling of the knot in her stomach. Naruto left the room with Fu and sealed the door behind him so no one else had to hear her painful screams. Thanks Fu, said Naruto as they walked out of the dungeon that was located underneath his castle. It was used to torture those he wanted to hurt personally. It was no problem, said Fu as she grinned at him. I have to admit though that your mom is pretty hot. Yeah, said Naruto as he chuckled, and that is why I plan to break her mind for a bit of fun before she dies. Any chance that I could have a bit of fun with her before you kill her? I'll think about it, said Naruto as he thought about it, but no promises there. Well, that is good enough for me. I have to admit that joining you in your quest was the best idea I have ever agreed to in my life. And I bet you are saying that just because it grants you so many different women to fuck and impregnate. I know, right? And there are even willing elvish women who wanted a piece of me, so I fucked them as well, and they bear the hatchlings too. Term and ask for more since they find the experience pleasurable. If only you swung both ways, said Naruto with a predatory grin, the things I would do to you. Well, said Fu as she stroked his chin with her hand, when a woman is drunk enough they go in so many ways. Is that a hint on what I need to do? Asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow. I have no idea what you are talking about, said Fu sweetly as she walked away from Naruto. But Naruto noticed the obvious sway to her hips as she did. Naruto had to admit that Fu was interesting to him. While she had a human appearance, she was able to form various appendages that insects were able to and then mold them away when she was done with them so that she once again retained her human appearance. Naruto then walked around town to find something to do since it would take a while to break his mother's will from the drugs that were injected into her. And as he walked about, he found himself at the Grand Library. While many humans believed that monsters were savage creatures, living in makeshift homes and caves, that was not entirely true. While it was true that they did do that, it was only because of the massive slaughter of their races that the various species remained nomadic. Since what was the point of creating a town if humans would just arrive and take everything from them in the end? Building a town would only make them bigger targets in the end, since it was a clear indication as to where they lived. Sure, they may fortify their homes to defend against any human army that would seek to kill them, but humans would send so many to eliminate them and would have the power of the gods at their aid to only empower them more. But now that humanity was no longer a factoring problem on this side of the world, they were once more able to establish towns and villages throughout their side and pursue a normal life once more. They worked together and built an expanding empire that would last through the ages, with the various species coexisting in harmony. Though while it was not perfect, it was far better than what had been when the humans alive. So nowadays there were such buildings like this that many people worked in. The history as well as the myths of the various species were documented within, and every day the collection grew larger. Mainly it was the arachnid who worked in this place, since they were able to access shelves for those who could not reach, and with their strings they were able to hang shelves from the ceiling so as to fit even more books than what humans were ever capable of. There were a few dark elves that worked in this place as well, and if he remembered correctly, Rhagnira was working today. Sure, they were his concubines, but they still had their own lives to live outside of all the sex he gave them. As he walked into the library, he walked to a familiar corner since he had been here quite often. In this corner of the library, he had a large tome that he was writing out his life story. He was livid with the details of all the things that he had gone through, and he spared not a single detail of the horrors that he had been witness to in his life. Yet as he wrote out more of his life story, which at this point he was at the age of 6 in terms of what he was writing, since there was so much details on the attacks that he suffered from the villagers in his youth. He even had the memories stored in the mind of Kiwa by himself of his first 5 years, which he himself could not even remember. Yet all that he had done to his mother had left him in a lustful mood, and he needed to relieve himself to think more clearly. So he set out to find one of his women in the library. As he walked into the library, he walked to a familiar corner since he had been here quite often. In this corner of the library, he had a large tome that he was writing out his life story. He was livid with the details of all the things that he had gone through, and he spared not a single detail of the horrors that he had been witness to in his life. Yet as he wrote out more of his life story, which at this point he was at the age of 6 in terms of what he was writing, since there was so much details on the attacks that he suffered from the villagers in his youth. He even had the memories stored in the mind of Kiwa by himself of his first 5 years, which he himself could not even remember. Yet all that he had done to his mother had left him in a lustful mood, and he needed to relieve himself to think more clearly. So he set out to find one of his women in the library. It's quiet inside the library. Naruto walked around, searching for one of his women. As he did, he spied Rhagnira sitting at a table organizing various books that she would then place in their proper place in the shelves. Above, she's chewing on the end of a pencil and staring intently at a big fat book lying open on the table. Her legs moved as she used them to organize multiple piles of books. She's wearing a jeweled necklace that he had given her as a gift that had a priceless jetstone in the center of it. He sat down next to her. She took the end of the pencil out of her mouth and looks at him expectantly. He grabbed her head in a sudden motion. She opened her mouth in surprise and locked his lips over hers, extending his tongue past her teeth. She struggles to break the kiss in a playful manner, yet he held on tight and tickled her tongue with his. Rhagnira lifted her feet off the floor, presses them to his chest and pushes. Her strong legs force him to break off kissing her. Listen, Buster, that wasn't a bad kiss. But you got to give a girl fair warning when you do something like that. Rhagnira says. He grabbed one of her feet and raised it to his face. Rhagnira gives him an odd look as he pressed the sweaty end of her insect foot against his nose. The smell of books is upon them, and he oddly finds it erotic to smell it on her. She murmurs something, her eyes half closed, and she wiggles her foot as if in approval of his new approach. The smell of her foot, part perfume and part girl sweat, intoxicates him. His dick tries to burst through his fly. He held her wiggling foot against his nose while he leaned forward and worked his other hand up under her abdomen. She squirms a little but doesn't resist as he tore a hole in the soft and soggy material of her white cotton cloth she used to cover up her privates, exposing her pussy to him. She moans when he bends her practically in two, getting her foot up next to her shoulder. He unzipped his fly with one hand, unwilling to remove her foot from his face. His dick springs free with a quick rise to action. He pointed it at her pussy and rested his weight on top of her. She wrapped her other leg around his waist. "Do me." Quietly, she whispers into his ears sensually. "This is a library?" He kept her foot firmly planted against his face while he slipped his dick inside her willing pussy. She stuffs her fist in her mouth to stifle her passionate moans, and he muffled his groans against the bottom of her feet. The scent of her foot fills his nostrils and the aroma keeps him hard even after he blew his first wad of spunk into her snatch. He momentarily released her foot so he can grab her ass and haul her out of the chair. He put her on the table and grabbed a hold of her foot again. She murmurs something he can't make out, and he pounded into her so hard the table shudders from the force he thrust into her. Her free legs grip his waist so tightly that he couldn't pull out of her even if he wanted to. But as this happened, he smirked since he saw that she was trying to set the pace here, but he was the dominant one here and he would make damn sure that she remembered that. So he summoned up multiple tendrils to grab a hold of each of her legs and held her in place, but she was too far gone into the pleasure of the moment and she didn't care what the hell he did as long as he kept the pleasure up. He even increased the pleasure she was receiving by shoving a tendril up the separate hole that was used to spin webs, her species equivalent of an asshole. He tried to stifle his groans against the bottom of Rhaenyra's foot, but it's no use in the end. Her pussy is doing such wonderful things to his dick so he can't help but make noise. He grunted loudly and pumped more cum into her as her eyes rolled into the back of her head. Her foot curls and uncurls against his nose, releasing more of that delightful aroma that keeps his dick hard. Rhaenyra loses it as well, screaming her way through a multiple orgasm that knocks several books off the table. A stern-faced librarian strides over to him. Her hair is done up in a severe bun held in place by two knitting needles. She glares daggers at him. Naruto looked up to see who exactly had dared to interrupt his fun, and to his surprise there stood Chloe. He had known that once the empire was set up and the army properly formed, she had disappeared into the background. He had always known that she was in love with Olga, and was pissed that she was now married to him, so she quit being a bodyguard and set out to live her own life. And it seemed like she had become a librarian instead of a warrior. "What do you think you are doing?" she demanded to know. He held Rhaenyra's aromatic foot with one hand and stuck his free hand up the Chloe's skirt. He was surprised to find that under that severe exterior there's a woman who isn't wearing panties. But then again he had sensed someone was watching them fuck in the library. He had been sure that it was another of the arachnid race, but instead it turned out to Chloe. She gasps and pressed her hands over her heart. He slipped first one, then two fingers inside her smooth pussy. He felt that she was so very wet since she had obviously been masturbating while she watched Naruto fuck Rhaenyra. It seemed like she wanted the same type of pleasure that he gave Olga. Chloe tries to escape, but he hooked his fingers inside her snatch and makes scissoring motions with them to stimulate her insides. Her legs tremble, but she somehow manages to remain standing. Rhaenyra pushes her foot against his nostrils. The scent makes his dick twitch inside her snug pussy even more than before. She moans from the sensation, and pressed the ball of his thumb against the Chloe's clit. She gasps and her pussy tugs at his fingers as she orgasms. Naruto then pulled his honey-coated fingers out of her pussy. She gasped and shudders, slowly coming back to her senses from the pleasure that he had given her. It was at this time that she began to see why Olga had stayed with him, since the pleasure he had given her was amazing and that was only with his fingers. She could only speculate on what his dick could feel like inside her. "I suppose, under the circumstances, I guess I could overlook this," she said. Rhaenyra moans louder as he pounded his dick into her even harder than before. Her foot uncurls from around his nose and then curl up tighter than before, holding his nose almost as tightly as her snatch grips his dick. The aroma of her sweaty, bookish-smelling foot makes his dick stiffen even more inside her. Chloe stares at the two of them for a long moment, but he ignored her for the time being and keeps humping away at Rhaenyra's pleasure bucks. Naruto missed the exact moment when Chloe left because Rhaenyra cries out and climaxes again. The shuddering of her body under him and the clenching of her pussy coaxes another blast of cum out of his hard dick. Naruto pressed his honey-coated fingers to Rhaenyra's lips. Her tongue flicks out to taste the Chloe's sauce, then the saucy book organizer grabs his wrist and slurps his fingers into her mouth and sucks hard. Naruto mashed his face against her fragrant foot still since he was unable to get enough of her scent. Having his fingers sucked so ardently feels almost like she's blowing him, except that his prick is buried to the hilt in her tight twat at the moment. Rhaenyra slides his fingers back out of her mouth when she has gotten every last bit of pussy juice off of them. "Tasty," she says. "Call that librarian back here. I'd like to lick some of that right from the source." "You do know that is Chloe, right?" asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow. "Who is she?" asked Rhaenyra, since she had never seen the woman before that he was talking about. "She was Olga's bodyguard for years before I came along and married her. And let me guess, she was in love with the woman you currently fuck on a near daily basis." "Right on the nose there," said Naruto as he tapped his nose to bring the point home. "Then this is going to be fun," said Rhaenyra as she licked her lips sultry since the situation was so sexy in her mind. Naruto had taken the one Chloe had wanted for herself and now with her help would be seduced into being fucked by the man who took her love from him. It was so evil in her mind, and after living with and fucking the entity of the darkness, she had learned to love evil in all forms. Hell, she even had the pleasure of torturing some of the people that Naruto kept locked away in the cells made for them. Since Naruto healed them afterwards, she could torture them as much as she wanted and continue to do so. "Oh, Miss Librarian," Naruto said loudly. Chloe came back towards them from wherever she was. While she didn't really want to come as called, one does not disobey the man and walk away happy. While he wouldn't kill the person, he would make their life a living hell for a short time, so they learned not to disobey. None made the same mistake twice. "Rhaenyra here would like to taste you. Lay down on the floor with us," Naruto says, and she looks at them with a look that shows that she is undecided on the whole thing. Sure, he had given her pleasure with his fingers, but she was still so very pissed at the man for stealing Olga away from her. In the end she had decided against it and made to walk away from them so as to not be tempted. But Rhaenyra would have none of that and quickly threw out several strands of webbing that tied around her arms and legs and pulls her back onto the table. Rhaenyra pulls up her dress and spreads her legs wide to get to her prize. She slips off his cock and kneels between the former bodyguard's knees. She licks her lovely pussy deep with her tongue hitting all the right spots. Chloe moans softly as her resistance was slowly fading away from the pleasure that she was being given. Naruto moved around the two of them until he was at the Chloe's head. He poked his cock at her lips. She kept her lips closed, but in the end she opens up from moaning, and began sucking his cock down like a prom date. She was pulling Rhaenyra's head in close to her pussy and moaning louder as her tongue snaked deeper into her. The moans vibrate around his meat, increasing his own pleasure. Pretty soon, she has her head back so far he can pound all the way in and out, and she takes all of his full thick cock. She lets go of Rhaenyra's head and grabs his ass, pulling him completely inside her mouth and down her throat. She screams, though it's very muffled by his shaft, and she swallows repeatedly on his fat mushroom head. Naruto couldn't take the pressure and exploded down her throat. A few seconds later, she squirts all over Rhaenyra, who quickly licks up as much girl cum as she can greedily. She had to admit that while she had sex with the other concubines that were with Naruto, it was the juices from elves, which were Chloe as well as Olga, that she liked the most out of all of them. Rhaenyra retracted her tongue and moved away from her pussy as she had gotten her fill. Naruto hated to abandon a mouth as surprisingly talented as Chloe's, but the librarian was clearly in desperate need of some fucking. Her throat tries to cling to his pecker, but with a little effort he got it out. He walked around the table and got into position. He lifted Chloe's skirt with one hand, since he was using the fingers on his other hand to finger Rhaenyra, and right now they were snug inside of her. Her pussy is oozing juices around those fingers, and her vaginal lips are swollen with arousal, but she would have to wait since she had gotten her loving already. Naruto pulled his fingers out, grabbed a hold of Chloe's hips, and stuffed her full of cock. Her pussy is even tighter and wetter inside than Rhaenyra's. But then again, Naruto has stretched his concubines from so much sex, and Chloe, though she was a sex slave in her youth before she was saved by Olga, had only been raped by human men. Naruto was beyond their sexual level, and the moans Chloe had only proved it. Chloe groans in appreciation of the dick filling her nicely. Naruto used a few tendrils to cut her free since the restraints were no longer needed. Then she raises both her legs and presses the bottom of one stockinged foot against his face, her toes plugging his nostrils. She presses her other foot against his cheek. She had seen Naruto get off on smelling Rhaenyra's insect leg, and she wanted Naruto to get off on her feet. And he did, since the smell of it caused his dick to expand within her, stretching her puss to the limit and causing her to gain a glazed look on her face. "It's alright if you want to leave," Naruto tells Rhaenyra. "I can satisfy myself with her." "Well," Rhaenyra says, "you've been awesome, but my pussy is getting kind of sore from how rough you were." She gives him a quick kiss, with tongue included, then puts her cloth back on to hide her privates and smooths it out. She then scampers off to find work to do in the expansive building, leaving him with his stiff dick balls deep in the elvish librarian. He stuffed one stockinged foot into his mouth and pressed the other one against his nose and breathed deep. Chloe shudders underneath him as he continues to pound into her. He licked all around her foot and inhaled deeply of her odors. This causes his dick to swell even more inside her. His hips move almost of their own accord, pumping his meat in and out of her. She groans loudly and his movements grow more violent. He shook the table as his dick empties itself into her moist depths. As he finished, he pulled himself out of her, pulled up his pants and left her there in sexual bliss, fully knowing that she was now hooked on his dick and would come back for more. And who knows, he might even get Olga involved next time so she could fuck the woman she wanted so much. The dungeons underneath Naruto's were echoing with the moans of the sole occupant of it. For the last week, Kushina was subjected to sexual torture on the orders of Naruto himself, with Fu being the one who delivered it upon her. She was allowed to do as she pleased, and was given full permission to do as she wanted to her, to break her mind to the point that she would beg for her son to fuck her with his cock. And so Fu did as she wanted. She used various toys of all sizes to stimulate her body, yet since she had altered her nerves, Kushina only felt pain from such actions. Fu laughed at her suffering and told her that she could feel good if she just submitted to Naruto, that all would be well if she begged to be fucked by him. Yet she stayed strong, and Fu got creative. With the help of dark magic that she learned from the Dark Elves, she learned the Fuda spell. There were those within the Dark Elf tribes that were lesbians and wanted to find a way to express their love in some way, so this was how they decided to do so. So Fu used that magic now to grow a sizable dick after she used her strings to tie Kushina to the table on her back with her legs spread eagle. But after all the rest of the things she did to her earlier, she had passed out, and Fu had put clothes back on her so she didn't freeze in the cell while she had thought on what to do next. She then released Kushina from her bindings, since even if she tried to run, there was nowhere to go for her. It was hard as a rock with a slight throb, in tune with her demonic heartbeat, dripping in glistening pre-cum, copious in its clear drips. coating the cock in a sheen that caused it to shine in the moonlight that came through the only window. It presented itself proudly from under the skirt of the demoness. Fu walked over to the table and stood over the woman who at this point had passed out from the pain Fu had inflicted upon her. Her penis throbbed harder as she thought about how to make this woman break as ordered. Fu bit her lip and leaned back and let her penis relish the soon-to-be conquest that laid in front of her. And her penis was pulsing in sexual anger. A drip of precum flipped off the purple tip of her cock and landed on Kushina's lips. She licked off the sexual juices and moaned in her pain-induced sleep. But that was no surprise to her, since when Fu used this magic, her cum was laced with strong aphrodisiacs. It was then that Fu got a wonderfully evil idea. She used a stinger that she grew from her head to stab Kushina in the head so that their minds were connected. What she saw in her mind genuinely surprised her, since she had no clue that this woman had such thoughts. It would appear that Kushina was bisexual, and not only that, but she actually lusted after her own daughter. And not only that, but from Kushina's memories it would seem that Naruto was a lesbian as well and played the daddy's girl role, since by doing so it deterred so many wannabe suitors of sorts, since no one was brave enough to ask her father to date her. So with the male sex all leaving her alone, she was free to pursue a few casual lesbian flings with various women of the village. Kushina had even spied on one of these flings when she had brought her friend Hana over and they made out on her bed. Kushina had spied from her own private hole that she had made to do as such and had masturbated furiously from watching them go at it for quite some time. It was also from one of these sessions that she had overheard them speak about their attraction to Kushina herself, which made Kushina's heart flutter, but then they mentioned how they couldn't since her Uzumaki upbringing stopped her from pursuing other relationships while she was married to Minato. So Fu used this knowledge to her advantage to mess with Kushina. In her dream she heard Naruto call out to her in a sensual voice, "Mommy, slide your panties down." Kushina moaned and followed the orders of her dream lover. Fu's smile widened but her eyes half closed as she was sharing Kushina's dream. "Spread your legs, mommy, spread them for me," whispered Naruto in her dream. "Yes," whispered the delirious Kushina as she spread her legs and opened her most vulnerable parts up for ravishing. From who she thought was her daughter. Fu leapt up on the table and knelt between the woman's spread legs. She leaned down like a feral cat and sniffed her moistened pussy and breathed a full deep breath. Then she crawled over her and leaned her face down close to Kushina's face and brought her lips in contact with the woman. Kushina dreamed she was kissing her daughter. The kiss was rich and full and passionate and everything Kushina dreamed kissing Naruto would be like. Between them Fu's cock throbbed and dripped juice onto Kushina's tummy and throbbed and dripped. Its patience was wearing thin. Fu knew from her previous conquests that her control of the magically grown penis was temporary and at times she felt like its vehicle rather than its owner. But then again it was a magical appendage that was an unnatural part of her body, so it was expected to have some sort of side effects. But the time was not yet upon her. She had some remaining control, enough yet to play since this was a temporary toy for her. She sat up on the woman's tummy now, her demonic cunt naked on her plaything's bare abdomen. For certain she had a vagina. She may have used magic to grow a dick to use on her captive, but she was still a woman nonetheless. She rubbed herself back and forth on Kushina and then lifted one of the dreaming woman's hands up and wrapped it around the pulsating shaft. Kushina let out an "oh" as she felt the gooey shaft of the cock in her hand. In her dream the cock was Naruto's and her surprise at finding a penis attached to her daughter was short-lived and quickly overridden by her lust. She had been sexually deprived for years, and she was basically desperate at this point for a cock inside her. The pain she suffered in the real world from her tormentor was great and her mind had grown lustful to the point that she would take any form of pleasure that she could get. She wanted Naruto inside her. She must get Naruto inside her. She began to give Fu a slippery handjob in the real world. Up and down went her strong mature hand. It barely went around a huge cock that Fu sported. Her cock twitched and Fu squealed and put a closed fist to her mouth since the sensitivity on her newly grown appendage was very high. When her penis was this close she knew she had no control of her pleasure. She threw her head back in ecstasy and put both her hands on her breasts. "Yes, my love. My slutty mommy, play with my cock." And Kusina brought her other hand up and went up and down with both. Fu shook her light green hair and screamed as a stream of semen flew from the head of her femcock and Kusina felt a hot sticky, gooey stripe of cum lace across her face. In her dream it was from her daughter Naruto and she felt so happy to finally act upon her sick fantasies. She kept pumping Fu's throbbing penis as a second streamer of femcum laced across her chest. Then 3 more strings in quick succession and then 2 jerking thrusts more shot cum across her mouth and eyes. Fu came on the woman until she seemed sated and her cock settled down and dribbled some last long slow dripping strings of white shining cum perfectly down into Kusina's belly button, filling it and running over the edge and running down the woman's abdomen to trickle down in rivulets into her crotch and past and over her pussy lips. Fu looked at her handiwork and smiled as she did since she knew that Kusina's will was almost broken and the fact that she was now covered in aphrodisiacs only made it a far more certainty. With her handiwork done here, she used the connection between their minds to begin warping her mind a bit, to add Naruto to her sick fantasies. She knew that it would take a while, but in the end Kusina would be broken and Naruto would be happy for it. It was a couple of days longer when Naruto finally came to claim his prize. Naruto had been thinking about what his mother had done all these years and began to wonder why exactly she had abandoned him as she had done. What words Minato had said to get her to follow him and abandon one of her own children as she had done to him. He had done his research and knew that the Uzumaki were ones to love family above all else, so to see his own mother break that cycle and forsake family such as him. Naruto could only shake his head and thank his lucky stars that the Uzumaki were dead, since if they were still alive to this day and he had become like he would have had to kill them all. Sure, he would have offered them a chance to join him in the end, but he highly doubted that they would have and he would be forced to kill them. He would have felt regret about it, since they were family, but then he thought about it and realized that if his clan was still alive then he wouldn't have become the way he was and the world would still be ruled by false gods as it was. It seemed like the Uzumaki were made to be the peacekeepers of the world, and with him he had to do so much more, to the point that he had died and become reborn to continue doing it on a far larger scale, and he had to wonder what exactly his clan would think of him now that he had become nothing short of a monster. But to break the world free from the control of false gods he had to become this way. That evening Naruto ordered Fu to go and retrieve his mother from her cell. Fu had done as ordered, but Kusina still had a bit of fight left in her, so she had struggled quite a bit when Fu came for her, so her clothes got torn and she had nothing to cover up with when she was brought to him. After what seemed like forever, she was brought to his room, Naruto having told his women what he planned to do so they would stay away. While they detested the fact that he was going to be intimate with a human, not really giving 2 shits that it was his own mother, since some species of monsters mated within their family, so it wasn't weird for them. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed as she tried to cover herself, yet was failing at it. "I'm going to do as I told you that I would do and break you," said Naruto with a grin. She started to protest, but Naruto yelled, "Shut up." And she paused. "Stop trying to cover yourself. It isn't working anyway. You can't do this, I'm your mother," she yelled. "I can and I will. Don't make this harder than it will be. Last time, move your hands." She trembled, but resisted. As he had expected, Naruto lunged forward, grabbed her arm with his left hand, and slapped her across the face with his right. Naruto shoved her against the bed, pinning her chest against the blanket with her legs hanging off the mattress. Her arms were tucked under her chest in a feeble attempt to cover herself. Naruto sat on her naked back, holding her down tightly and preventing her from moving. Naruto grabbed her ass harshly while she squirmed, feeling the tender stark white flesh in his hands. He had felt far more perfect skin on his wife Olga along with his various concubines, but for a human she had smooth skin. It's not going to work, sweet mother of mine. You need to accept the facts. This empire is mine. You are mine. You are going to submit to me. I realize this is hard for you. But I will break you. You won't be the same woman. You have to accept that. Now stop fighting. After a few minutes of squirming, she realized he wasn't getting off of her body. She didn't understand what Naruto was doing to her, but she stopped fighting since her struggles were in vain. Good. Now for tonight, I'll accept your word that you are going to submit, but first I have to punish you for fighting me. I can't accept your resistance. Naruto pulled out a leather whip that he planned on using. He had expected resistance to his plans. Climbing off her back, but holding her down with multiple tendrils of darkness, between her bare shoulder blades, he raised the whip and struck her on the ass. She cried out at the sharp pain, and he instantly saw the red slash mark appear across her bottom. He struck her again with more force and could feel the crack of the whip against her flesh. It'll be more fun if you count, said Naruto with a smirk. Another strike. Tears filled her eyes as she spoke 3. Then he struck off 3 quick, hard blows and she cried out for him to stop. Yet he wasn't going to stop. He continued slowly for 15 minutes until he reached a full, agonizing 30 strokes. By then her ass was dark red and marked with deep crimson lines and her body shook continuously. Her face was covered with tear streaks and a constant sob came from her mouth. He finally stopped and released her from the bed. Instead of scrambling away as he had expected, she just curled into a ball on the bed with her 2 hands tenderly covering her red-cut ass. Naruto admired his work. Since it had begun, he hadn't had a chance to admire her naked, helpless body. Between her legs he could see a peek of her light pink pussy, though she tried to conceal it from his eyes. Focusing further, he could discern the sweet smell of her cunt in the air. Her breasts were bare as all her focus was on her throbbing ass. Naruto stared at them and admired the tight pink nipples which lightly contrasted with her pale breasts. Breaking away from his thoughts he asked, "Are you done fighting?" She looked up with a tear-filled face. "Good, now don't move." He left her there and went to another room. He returned with a strand of rope he had an orc make for him. He had learned that orcs made some of the best rope around, but then again orcs had been kidnapping human females for hundreds of years, so of course they mastered rope making so that their victims couldn't escape. He took her arms which were still covering her bottom and began to tie them together. Her arms were firm and toned with a moderate tan. He tied them tightly from just above the elbows down to her wrist, which immobilized her arms. He had plenty of practice from all the bondage he had done with Rhaenyra. Since she always tried to subdue him, but he would turn the tables on her and tie her up with her own strings and fuck her brains out. While she may shout her hatred of being made submissive, but it took only a few minutes for her to become putty in his hand. "You won't need those for now," Naruto said mockingly to her. "Sorry if it's not very comfortable. Before we end for the night there is still one more thing you need to do for me." Naruto rolled her onto her back, again taking in the sight of her naked breasts which arched up because of the position of her arms. He ran his hands over their smooth flesh and grabbed both nipples between his fingers. He rolled them back and forth to feel them grow hard. He bent down and pressed his lips against her breast, taking her nipple between his teeth. He sucked on it as he ran his tongue across the firm tip. Finally, he released her breasts and stood, removing his pants. At this, she yelled for him to stop. "Soon, mother. First you have to eat my cum." Her eyes told the story. His voice changed, suddenly harsher than it had been when he had started. "That's right, bitch, you have to suck my dick, or I'm going to start over on your ass." She started to turn on the bed, but he grabbed her shoulder to hold her in place. Then he straddled her chest and pressed his dick against her lips. She refused to open her lips. He looked into her scared, violet eyes and said, "Fine. Make it hard." Then he pinched her nose, knowing she couldn't hold her breath for long. Quickly she opened her mouth with a gasp. At that moment he shoved his rock-hard cock into her mouth and told her to take it in. Still holding her nose, he fucked her face while she gasped for air and squirmed under his weight. Feeling her tongue sliding around the shaft of his cock made him feel so powerful. He owned his mother now, he told himself. Mercifully for her, he came quickly. "Don't swallow yet. Show it to me." She opened up her mouth to show him the wad of creamy cum he deposited. He chuckled as she did it. "Now swish it around like mouthwash. I want you to taste me all over your mouth." She complied, and then swallowed. "One last thing for tonight." Naruto pulled out an orb that saved images that he wanted to save for later. He had gotten the idea from the memories of the darkness of technology long gone, something called a camera if he remembered, but the tech was lost to him. He got pictures of her tear-streaked face with cum in her teeth. One of her naked breasts. He rolled her over to get her bound arms and whipped ass. Lastly, he spread her legs and photographed her asshole and pussy, which he noted was moist, and got a fresh whiff of her sweet scent. "You're such a whore, mother. And to think, you don't know the half of what I have planned for you." Naruto grabbed her arms and pulled her off the bed. He walked her back through the hallway that Fu had taken her down back towards her cell and threw her down on the floor roughly. "You can sleep here tonight. Maybe you'll earn a spot in bed next to me. But you have to earn that privilege." Naruto slammed the door and locked her inside, arms still bound, mouth still caked in his cum. As he walked away he saw Fu standing there leaning against the wall with a smirk on her face. "She's all yours, Fu," said Naruto as he walked away. Fu quickly grabbed his face and kissed him deep with tongue for what was basically a gift to her. She then chuckled to herself as she grabbed a large box of toys she would use to break the bitch's mind once and for all and beg her son to fuck her. And as she closed the door to the cell, the screams of Kushina could be heard, or at least they would be if there was anyone else in the cells below Naruto's castle. Bedroom. Albedo waited patiently in her lover's bedroom as she saw him take the human woman somewhere else. She didn't really care enough to follow them and instead waited within for his return. Naruto had ordered them all to stay away, but her loins had gotten the best of her and she wanted him now. Her husband/master, at least that is how she saw it, returned to his room with the stench of that human woman on him, and the demon had to suppress her angry jealousy. Why the lord of all those who the pathetic race known as humans dared to call monsters would resort to consorting with said filthy humans when he had multiple beautiful supernatural wives, Albedo would never know. "Hello master, did you finish your business with that human woman?" Albedo asked her lord sweetly. Maybe he will give her a good fuck tonight. The darkness knew she needed it since her libido affected her sanity, and if she didn't get enough loving she became homicidal as well as sociopathic. Luckily this didn't happen as much since the fierce fucking Naruto gave her sated her cravings for quite some time. "Yeah," Naruto just grunted. Albedo was always a bit rebellious when it came to his orders. While she wouldn't downright disobey him, it was a bit of a nuisance in his mind. Albedo kept her frustration down as she served him his dinner that she had prepared and set up in his room since she was trying to set some type of mood. She noticed that her lover was distracted, with a faraway gaze and a mischievous smirk. She knew what was coming. After all, she's seen that look 9 times already in the time that she has known him. She had to do something quick. If it had been another species of some sort it wouldn't have bothered her that much. But a human. That is something she would not stand for. "My lord, had something caught your eye?" Albedo asked nonchalantly. No, I just found something interesting that I have been meaning to do for a while now, Naruto said as he brushed her aside. Oh? Would you care to tell? Well, aren't you rather intrusive today? Don't have something better to do than bother me? Naruto snapped at her. Albedo recoiled, a bright fury flourishing inside her, but she simmered down. She knew she'd never strike against her lover, since that was foolish to even consider. Albedo lowered her head in obedience. My apologies, master. The demona slid off her dress, leaving only her white corset. She summoned a bottle of lavender oil from her room and began rubbing it all over her skin, pale and beautiful, as light as a ghost-made flesh. Her perfect long black hair hung pleasantly down to her white hips while her tits were pushed up from the corset. Albedo crawled onto her master's bed, leaned against the pillows, and spread her legs wide, allowing all her cunt juice to dribble on the sheets. Then she waited as she saw Naruto look at her. I need you, master, Albedo smirked, gently rubbing her clit. I can see that, Naruto said, unbuttoning his shirt. Not a minute later, Naruto pounced on the busted demoness, wrapping his hands around her small throat and watching her bulge out as her body squirmed for air. Naruto stroked his hard cock, smiling as his woman struggled. He loved this. He loved watching his personal whore suffer, silently begging to be released, but knew that she could never disobey him. Finally he let go of her neck and rammed his dick into her drenched pussy. Albedo threw her head back and moaned, grabbing a handful of the sheets. Naruto continued to ram his dick inside her, her walls squeezing his member every time he expertly hit her G-spot. She was panting hard like a bitch in heat. Then another orgasm hit her once more, filling her thoughts with nothing but pleasing her master. He was hers and only hers. The other women would never have this kind of passion or connection as she does with her master. Soon, Naruto pulled out and Albedo instinctively sat up and opened her mouth, waiting for his load to blow. After spilling his semen into her mouth, the demoness collapsed on the bed and fell asleep from the rough fucking. 2 weeks later, Naruto had waited patiently for the past 2 weeks for the group from Konoha to arrive in his empire. He was surprised that it took them this long to reach his empire, but once he saw through the eyes of his night wolves, he saw that they had been ambushed by a small group of resistance fighters who wanted to kill Minto to end his tyrannical reign. But in the end they failed in their attempt and were killed by Minato and his group, who suffered no casualties of their own. Naruto had just scoffed at that bit of information, since he had let people group up and make the attempt to fight back. He had cut off all forms of resistance by eliminating the only race that was stupid enough to challenge his authority on this side of the world. Monsters were born with a sense of power like animals in nature, so they knew when they were outclassed and submitted to those who were stronger than them as the alpha. It was because of that sense that helped the various species know peace, since they never went against instincts and knew their place. Sure, there were some instances where a monster would challenge their betters. And about 95% of the time they were killed by their betters. Those 5% were able to succeed and become stronger by doing so. And while it had been 2 weeks for them to arrive, they were not uneventful in the slightest. He had managed to finally break his mother's mind so that he was able to use her as his personal toy at any time, which he did along with his women, who joined in and violently handled her as they did. What was broken could be healed, and they knew this, so they let her have it. But that was minor in comparison with the other 2 major events that had happened these past 2 weeks. The first had been a bit of a surprise to him, since he had honestly not expected it in the slightest. He had been sitting on his throne after meeting with various heads of major tribes and groups of all species. He helped them with their problems, which mainly consisted of land rights as well as tools and resources that one species had that another didn't, so they used him as a way to keep the peace, since all were smart enough to not make trouble near him. While he sat there and sipped the wine in his glass, he was attacked out of the blue by someone he had never seen before. She was a beautiful tanned woman with draconic features. Her legs were draconic down to her feet to the point that she had clawed feet. Her hands were the same, but the scales ended at her hands themselves, which were human with sharp nails. She had a large tail as well as wings. She had light purple hair and horns that curved around her head like a halo that broke off at the front and bent upwards. She had bands of what appeared to be fire on her arms, and they seemed to be a source of her power, since as she attacked, the flames of her bands covered her hands and she used it to slice his chair into pieces. Since he had dodged it? Well, said Naruto as he flexed his muscles a bit as he cracked his hands, I'm surprised to see someone like you here. And why do you say that? Asked the woman as she got into another stance to attack once more. It is because you have draconic features, said Naruto as he pointed towards her, so I am guessing that you are child of my friend Smog, the dragon's name. Since I like that dragon, seeing that he was the last dragon to exist. Yes, said the woman, my father is Smog. I am surprised to see one of his children turn out like you, said Naruto as he thought about it, but then again he has only sired sons up to this point, so maybe you take up more after your mother since you are a female. Who are you? My name is Zara D. Ursa, said the now named woman, and I am here to claim what is mine. She is a One Piece fandom character with 5 forms. Using the magma form for this story, and she is a draconic creature, not a devil fruit user, so she is not weak to sea water. Okay, said Naruto with a raised brow, that was not the sort of response I was expecting, but what exactly is it that you think is yours to claim, and how exactly does that tie in with me? As I became of age, my father warned me that I would need to find a mate to carry on our bloodline, said Zara with a bit of a smirk, and I owe it to my family to find the strongest alpha male to breed strong offspring with. That is why I am here, to claim you as my mate to help me. Damn, laughed Naruto as he heard this bold statement come from this woman, you do not pull any punches and jump right in. I like your mindset, but do you really believe that you are worthy of me? I will prove my worth with my life, said Zara as she channeled magic through her legs into her feet. This caused the ground around her to turn into ash, which once it had turned she stomped the ground so that the ash scattered into the air and blinded his view. She charged forward as the ash covered her body, and the ash lit a flame as she did from the friction alone. She grew near her target, but was stopped dead in her tracks 7/8 of her starting position to her target. What had stopped her was a fairly pissed Olga, who came into the throne room for some private time with her husband since it had been a bit before their last session, but to also see this bitch attack him as well was crossing the line. She knew that Naruto could easily take her, but she was beneath him, so she would deal with her herself. Zara was stopped by a midair protective circle that Olga conjured up to block the attack. She pulsed energy through it so that she was blasted backwards. Zara growled at the intruder to what was supposed to be a simple show of skills to impress her desired mate. From the scent of her, Zara knew that this woman was a mate to Naruto, so if she was eliminated then Zara could take her place at his side. So she formed her hands into a heart shape and took a deep breath. Once done with that, she blew out with her power that launched an all-consuming wave of draconic flames that engulfed most of the room. Naruto saw her do this and was truly impressed at what he saw her do. Yet he also knew that Olga was not so easily defeated since he had trained her himself, since while she had strong magic, it could still be stronger, which he helped her realize, along with the fact that she had to know how to fight physically as well as magically. She saw the flames come towards her and summoned up a massive amount of power to send out a tidal wave of water from the healing springs of their most sacred tree. Normal water would have done nothing against draconic flames, but this water was magically enhanced and snuffed them out hallway towards her. Zara grew more pissed as she saw her attack fail, but she quickly formed more fireballs and began to throw them at Olga in rapid succession. Olga just calmly walked towards her as she summoned up miniature black holes that sucked up the fireballs launched at her. Zara grew angrier as her attacks were coming up short, but before she could do anything Olga had summoned up several blades that pierced her from behind in a non-lethal manner. Olga moved in to take this bitch's head by impaling it with a spear she conjured up, but was stopped by Naruto himself as he grabbed her arm. "There will be no need for that," said Naruto as he pulled her towards him and kissed her deep with tongue to lessen her anger, which it did. "She has proven herself worthy." "But she tried to kill you," said Olga in shock that he would say that. "And that is exactly why she is worthy," said Naruto as he pulled out all the blades that Olga had skewered Zara with. "Out of all the women who have become mine over the years, she is the only one to actually fight me for the right. The rest of you simply submitted once they knew exactly who I was, and she challenged me even with that knowledge, so she interests me." Naruto then bent down and pulsed magic through her body. She felt her body heal from the damage done to it and was grateful for the assistance as well as the acceptance. Naruto then pulled her to her feet, and as he did, she latched her lips onto his own and kissed him deep as he had done to Olga. Naruto grabbed her ass and fondled it in a way that made her putty in his hand, and she loved it. They eventually parted due to Zara needing air, and he told her to wait in his room for later. As she walked by Olga, she smirked as Olga growled in fury that this bitch had managed to worm her way into her husband's pants. After attacking him, and that was unacceptable in her mind, but her husband had spoken and she was not one to defy him. The second event to happen was he had found and captured Orochimaru in the eastern lands. The man had hidden himself well over the years since all of his hideouts were found and destroyed. He had not stopped in his pursuit of immortality in the slightest, and worked even harder at it now that Minato was actively searching for him with the intent of killing him. Naruto had a small pack of his night wolves to seek him out, and eventually they did, and once they did, Naruto opened a portal up and pulled him along with Kabuto through it and bound them with his tendrils. They of course struggled feebly against their restraints, as well as shouted threats of all sorts. Naruto waited patiently for them to finish before he spoke to them. They didn't recognize him at first, but after a little bit of time they did, and were shocked that the boy that they were under the belief was dead was now alive and far more powerful than before. Naruto explained the situation of their side of the world and how humans were filth that needed to become extinct. Orochimaru as well as Kabuto were truly worried at his statement, since they assumed that he was going to kill them, but once again they were shocked when he instead offered them a chance to survive, to live on and experiment to their heart's content, since humans were filth. He even offered them power in exchange for their loyalty, since he wanted their help in developing various forms of killing humans in a quicker way than sending his army to do it. While they could get the job done and slaughter them in time, it took too much time in between campaigns, and he wanted to finish it sooner rather than later. They questioned why he wanted their help when what they did was considered inhuman, but it was then that Naruto laughed and told them that was exactly why he wanted their help, since he didn't give two shits about humanity, and their expertise in the inhuman field was perfect, since not one of the citizens of his empire was human. Orochimaru as well as Kabuto accepted his offer, and using his power he expelled their humanity painfully from their bodies, leaving them with nothing more than snake-like humanoid bodies that suited them just fine. They became the first of what Naruto would refer to as the Chimera race, since he gifted them the race they now were. So they set about in their experiments as they wanted to do, and luckily for them there were thousands of subjects from the prisoners in the throne room as well as the women who were now barren and of no use as breeders. The two of them took all they could get and reveled in their work, and even had multiple assistants, since there were many others who were curious in their field. Day of meeting, Naruto had spent the last few days sparring with his newest concubine Zara, who once gifted his power as he had done to the rest of his women, actually became a challenge to the others. But then again she was the offspring of a dragon, considered one if not the most powerful race, classified as a monster, and a fallen goddess, so it wasn't much of a surprise to see her excel in power like she was. She fought Olga again in a rematch, and to Olga's surprise was able to shatter her protective spells as well as counter any offensive ones she used as well quite easily. But finally the day arrived with Minato's group finally arriving in his capital. He had given explicit orders for those who were in their direct path of travel to either use their humanoid form if they were capable of such things via illusion or transformation, and for those who were unable to do so to hide away for a bit while they pass by. They listened to him, and as their group walked through the city they sensed nothing awry as they made their way to the throne room itself. They were shown the way by a vampire maid, who when they weren't paying attention to her growled in disgust that such filth was even allowed to enter this castle and not in chains or bonds. Soon they were in the throne room, which was dark with the only light coming from the torches on the pillars that led to Naruto's throne itself. They walked towards the throne, but as they neared it they saw nobody was on it, which was strange to see since they were supposed to meet the Emperor today, so he should have been there to meet them. "Hello there, guests from the east," said Naruto as he appeared from the darkness that was behind his throne. He didn't have any torches lit behind it, so there was nothing but vast empty space filled with darkness behind his throne. He came out of his hiding place wearing a smooth faceless mask, absolver mask, on his face as he sat down on his throne and observed the group before him. He smirked behind the mask since he had waited for this day for so long that it was hard to believe that it was happening at all in the first place, since everything was in place according to his plan. "Your Highness," started Minato before he was quickly stopped. "There is no need for the formalities, Minato," said Naruto with a raised hand, "for you and I are on equal ground, are we not? You are the Emperor of the East while I am the one of the West, so we are even on the ladder of hierarchy." "Well, in that case," said Minato as he sheepishly rubbed the back of his head since he didn't expect him to say that. Yet while on the outside he seemed friendly and surprised, inside he was seething that this man before him had the gall to think that they were equals, since Minato had such a high view of himself to the point that no one else could possibly be at his level. He mentally reminded himself to make this man suffer greatly before his execution in the future once their plan followed through and this dark empire was under their complete control. "By what name shall we call you?" "Please refer to me as Grim," said Naruto as he sat comfortably in his throne, "but that only goes for you. The rest of your group shall still refer to me by my formal title. I apologize for the mask, but I was sparring with one of the soldiers within my army and was slashed across the face. I healed, but it left a scar. This mask has magical properties that allows the face to be healed from all scars and return it back to its pristine condition." "That is amazing," said Minato in surprise that this empire had an item like that. It made him question what else they could have here in the empire to expand their arsenal. "Indeed it is," said Naruto as he saw the glint of greed appear in the eyes of his father. "But it is fairly small in comparison to other mystical items that are within our possession, but that is for another time." As he said that, the shinobi group heard someone walk up from behind them, and what they saw made their mouths drop a bit in shock. There stood Olga in the same outfit that she wore when Naruto had met her himself, and the outfit she wore made the males in the group suffer minor nosebleeds from looking at her. "Perfect timing," said Naruto as he smirked at the faces of the males in his father's group, since Olga was his woman and he would personally castrate anyone who so much as tried to take what was his. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce my wife Olga Discordia." "It is a pleasure to meet you," said Olga, who mentally gagged that she just said that to humans of all things, but she had to put on appearances for her husband's sake. She walked by them and sat down next to Naruto in another throne that arose from the ground, the act of which confused their group since they wondered how it just appeared like it had. "Now that we are all in attendance," said Naruto as he got their attentions once more, "we can begin with our meeting here." "This is everyone you wish to have in attendance?" asked Minato with a raised eyebrow, since he didn't sense a single other person in the room, so he began to wonder where were the guards to protect their emperor. It was as if the man was just asking to be attacked by someone. He wasn't going to argue with it since it just made it easier for his plans to succeed in the end. "Yes it is," since I need no guards for a simple civil meeting between two emperors of their respective empires. So now I have to ask why you are here and what exactly is it that you hope to gain from a meeting between us. We are the two empires that control this continent, but the world is far larger than our continent alone. We have no idea what the world is like outside of our lands and wish to prepare ourselves for the unknown, making itself known in quite a violent way in the future. With the combined might of our empires we could easily repel all who would see us as a target and in return turn the tables on them and conquer their lands to help expand our own. I wish for an alliance so that instead of fighting one another, we focus our effort outwards without all the fear of attacking neighbors. You speak the truth, said Naruto as he held his hand under his chin in what appeared to be thought. Minato mentally smirked at this since he believed Naruto had bought his speech and would accept it. Once the alliance was in place, he would place shinobi in the perfect position to strike down all who oppose the rule of their new supreme emperor so that the others will fall in line once this man was dead and dealt with. He might even let the empress live if she begs hard enough and pledges herself to him a concubine. But before we continue on with these talks, I have one simple question for you to answer. And it is one only you yourself can answer. Okay, said Minato with a hint of surprise since he was unsure as to where this conversation was going. What is your question? Years ago, started Naruto as he stood up and slowly paced back and forth in front of his throne, I was beginning to start my plans of conquering the western lands to form the empire I have made. As I did, I had some of my trustiest of spies infiltrate the eastern lands so that I would know that they were not attacking my men from the flank, since I wanted to deal with the west and not the east. My spies were fairly good at their craft and told me about all I needed to know in this side of the world. Yet there was one thing that caught my attention most of all out that was told to me. And what exactly caught your interest? Said Minato, who made a note to find this thing that had somehow intrigued the emperor of another empire and use it within his own forces. It was simply a small child, said Naruto as he stopped pacing and turned to face Minato fully. A small child caught your interest? For what reason was that? It was simple, really. I sensed so much potential in that boy that others could not see themselves. I had a spy of mine monitor the boy for years as he grew up, since I made plans to offer him a place within my army if he so wished. And judging by what was done to him most of his life, I was fairly sure he would have chosen to leave for greener pastures. And what exactly was done to this boy? Asked Minato as he was trying to put the pieces together in his mind, and yet it was slow going as he listened intently. This boy was beaten, stabbed, poisoned, and basically every other possible form of torture was inflicted onto him. I wondered why this was and heard the rumors that the boy was a demon. That he had killed villagers years before, yet he was no demon. I have faced demons personally and killed quite a few of them myself, and seeing that boy suffer like that showed me that there are times where humans themselves can become the demons they claim others are. But even though I wanted to save that boy, I needed to concentrate all my effort in my own campaign, so retrieving the boy would have to wait. And so I did just that, but by the time my empire was founded and peace established, my spies came to me and told me about the execution of one Naruto Uzumaki. On the orders of his own father, Minato Namikaze, who performed the killing himself. I am sorry, said Minato in confusion, since he was completely unsure as to why Naruto was being mentioned at all here, since the brat was dead for 10 years now and forgotten by the people. But I fail to see what the question is here. My question to you, Minato, said Naruto as he pointed toward the man, is why would you force your son to bear such a burden and abandon him like that, only to order his death and kill him yourself years later? What exactly does this have to do the chance of an alliance? Asked Minato, who was beginning to worry that Naruto had somehow made friends with this man as he had done with so many other influential people in his short shinobi career. Because I wish to know if you can be trusted, said Naruto simply, for many people make alliances for so many different reasons, but not empires. Empires always fight since their views always differ in some way that makes peace impossible, and they fight instead. Kingdoms align themselves together to protect themselves, as well as villages and cities. But empires are made of numerous cities and villages, so there is no need for alliances between them. Yet you wish to break from the norm that is history and try to make one work out between us. So if I can't trust you, there is no chance of an alliance between our two empires. I ordered his execution since I had sealed a demon within his body when he was a baby. It took quite some time for the seal to bond the two together, and in the end it worked once I killed him. But why him? Asked Naruto, who really wanted to know his father's reasoning for picking him out of the 3 children he had. Because out of all 3 children he was the weakest one out of them. And how could you possibly tell that when they were just children? Because we had a few censors at hand who said as such. I thank you for your honesty, said Naruto as he felt the rage within his body grow to levels he would soon unleash on these humans in front of him. To be called weak at such an age and made to suffer for it because of it was just plain stupid. Of course he was weak since he had been a newborn child at the time. But he kept his anger contained, since what would happen next would make up for all the pain and suffering he was forced to go through his entire life. So now that I have proven that I can be trusted to speak the truth, said Minato, since he believed that his chances of gaining an alliance were fairly good right now, shall we speak of our terms of this alliance? Naruto just looked at his wife, and then burst out laughing along with Olga. Minato looked at the two of them, but he didn't understand what exactly was so funny between the two of them. Naruto continued laughing for a minute before he calmed down and stood up straight. No, I am afraid that there will be no alliance this day, nor any day at that, said Naruto as he walked towards Minato with his hands behind his back. What? Shouted Minato in rage that his plan was not going so well. Why? Simply because we don't ally ourselves to the weak, said Naruto bluntly with a slight chuckle. It was then that Minato threw a kunai at him to use as anchor to teleport towards, and he succeeded in his attempt, but the sword he was going to use to cut off his head was stopped mid-swing by several rings of light that appeared around 3 separate sections of his arm. Olga stood behind Naruto with a glowing raised hand, showing those who saw it that she was the one responsible for the counter. How is this possible? Said Minato in shock that his attack was stopped so easily. He struggled to break whatever hold Olga had on him, but try as he might he could not break free. Did you think my woman was just a piece of eye candy? Asked Naruto as he stood in place unflinching, because I can see why you would think that. She has the looks of an ebony goddess with both the strength as well as the sexual skills to match it. Olga blushed at that last one. Don't just stand there, shouted Minato to his group, who all made to attack at once, but Naruto simply snapped his fingers and saw multiple threads of webbing hit them all and stick them in place. As they struggled against the webbing, all of Naruto's lovers came out of the shadows and stood behind him. I would like to introduce you to the rest of my women, whose names are not really any of your business since it does not really matter to you. You call those freaks women, growled Kiba as he struggled harder with the webbing that held him, because all I see are abominations that should be killed. Big talk coming from a virgin male who claims to be an alpha of all things, said Naruto as he summoned a tendril that pulled Kiba out of the webbing but still locked him in place. I am not a virgin, growled Kiba in rage that he had been called such by this asshole, for an alpha like me has multiple bitches that please me at my command. Mocha dear, said Naruto to his vampire lover. She knew exactly what he wanted her to do, so she extended a claw and cut his cheek. She tasted the blood that flowed out of the wound and licked the rest of her finger. Yep, said Mocha with a grin on her face, definitely a virgin. Bitch, shouted Kiba before he was kicked over by Naruto himself hard. More tendrils spread his legs apart along with his hands in a manner that he was spread out on the ground facing up. Why are you doing this? Asked Sam, who saw her son hurt and wanted to save him, but the webs were too strong to cut or even bite through. Please have mercy. Mercy, Naruto growled as his anger began to pulse from his body. His lovers felt the power and it made them feel warm inside since he was going to fuck up the humans in the worst possible ways and they were eager to see what exactly he would do to them. Mercy! Naruto yelled as he clenched his hand into a fist tightly. He summoned another tendril. That yanked Tsum before him on her knees along with her canine companion. Tsum was shivering in utter fear from the power she felt was resonating off of him. You dare beg for mercy for your son when you yourself are incapable of granting it to those who deserve it. That is not true, said Tsum before she was slapped hard across the face to the point that one of her fangs flew out of her mouth. Where was my mercy, you lying bitch? Asked Naruto as he held her throat and forced her to look at his masked face. Where was my mercy from anyone in that pathetic village when I was hurt and near death? Or when you ordered that mutt of yours to bit out my eye when I was only 5 years old while you drank and laughed as you blocked the only way out of that alley? It was in that moment that Tsum finally understood how deeply she was in trouble, since with that simple sentence she knew exactly who he was behind the mask. Naruto, said Tsum with horrified eyes. Naruto then grabbed the mask on his face and pulled it off. He crushed it in his hand since it was simply a mask and had none of the power that he said it did, since he only said that so they wouldn't question him on why he had it on. In the flesh, you heartless bitch, said Naruto with a smirk as he whistled. Out of the shadows came a dozen of his night wolves, and Naruto used his tendril to throw Tsum's mud at them. She was then forced to watch as he was torn apart piece by piece as they ate him alive. Kiba's mud met the same fate, and once they were dead they sunk back into the shadows. Naruto, my son, started Minato in an attempt to use this to his advantage somehow, but he wasn't able to say anything else since Naruto appeared before him and slammed his head hard into the ground. You have no right to call me family in any way or form, growled Naruto as he slammed his foot on the back of Minato's head, but with just enough power to hurt him since he didn't want to kill him yet. For you just admitted to my face that you saw me as the weakest of your children. And yet who's the weak one now, Minato? Naruto summoned his tendrils to force Minato to his knees as Tsum was. Do you really believe that you could walk into my empire and try to take everything from me? Laughed Naruto as he walked towards Danzo, who had yet to stop trying to unseal his special arm he kept hidden. That I wouldn't know why you would bring him of all people here. Naruto conjured up a blade that he used to decapitate Danzo, who had just managed to unseal his arm as he died, so his body phased out and he appeared behind Naruto. He tried to strike Naruto down from behind, but Naruto used his darkness-enhanced chakra chains to penetrate him in several places. They didn't kill him, but they instead spread a corrosive form of corruption that purged Danzo's life in a manner that even the Sharingan grafted into his arm couldn't revive him. Danzo screamed in pain as he felt himself melt away from the inside, and once his body was completely corrupted, it imploded upon. So, that's it for today. I hope you guys like it and enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel for great stories like this. Thank you, see you soon in next video.